Bueno, muchas gracias. Para mí es siempre un placer estar en Santiago y especialmente en el caso de un seminario tan importante como este seminario. Desgraciadamente tengo tantas limitaciones con mi español y tenemos limitaciones respecto de tiempo, por eso en interés de eficiencia voy a hablar en inglés. My English is just a little better than my Spanglish. Not much. So as Patricia said, I am going to talk about the international experience with early childhood development. The problem is there are large numbers, over 200 million children, as estimated in a recent well-known series in the journal Lancet, who don't reach their potential in developing countries. And there's relatively limited resources that are dedicated to these children. This, of course, has a large cost, a large human cost. It also has a large cost in terms of productivity of societies. And that's what I'm going to summarize some of the evidence about. So I'm going to talk somewhat about this evidence in regard to the impact of early childhood development, then turn to some comparisons with the effect of early childhood development versus alternatives, and then finally have some concluding remarks. So first, evidence in regard to the impacts of programs of early childhood development. The basic question, as is posed in the slide, is what is the nature of the impact of these programs? What do we know on a scientific basis? And the summary I'm going to give first is based on another article in 2007 in Lancet, in which Patrice Engel, who will be the next speaker, and I were involved in putting together the study. On the basis of the studies in which we thought the evidence was strong, there is substantial evidence of important impacts on both cognitive development and social emotional interactions of various types of programs. The slide summarizes programs of three types. These are significant effects. They are fairly substantial effects and lead to promise for effects that will persist over the life cycle. This is a particular example of a study in the Philippines, and the point here is that the effects depend very much upon the age of exposure of the children. Although there is controversy about exposure during the first year of life, subsequent early exposure seems to have a large effect in this case, and the duration of the exposure. So the greater the duration, the greater the effects. The characteristics which come out of this survey in the Lancet that are important for programs include having integrated programs, include importantly having programs that are directed towards the children who are most in need. That's where the payoff appears to be greatest. There also needs to be sufficient intensity and duration of programs. And finally, the quality of programs is very important. But I must say that in the information available to us in that survey, there was a limited degree to the extent to which we could actually actually make a judgment about what are the dimensions of quality that are important. And this is a gap, in my view, in the literature. Secondly, I want to look at the importance of early childhood development as compared with other kinds of investments. And I use the term investment because I'm focusing on the productivity of early childhood development. As indicated there, there's comparisons of the effects of early child development versus alternative kinds of investments. And then I want to turn to estimates of benefit to cost ratios. This chart from Guatemala, this table from Guatemala, gives some evidence about the impact in the first column of improvements in preschool cognitive abilities on a set of outcomes which are indicated in the rows. The first one being schooling attainment, the second one being adult reading capacity, etc. And the second column gives the impact of changing, in both cases by 1 standard deviation, maternal schooling. And we know maternal schooling is very important. But what is striking here, just comparing the entries in red versus those in blue, is that maternal schooling is very important, but improvements that might come about through other channels of maternal schooling in preschool cognitive ability are even more important in a relative sense than maternal schooling. Another example, we also in Guatemala undertook some estimates of what economists would call a production function for what adults know in regard to reading capacity. These are adults who are 25 to 42 years of age. And we include a summary measure of preschool experiences, whether or not a child was stunted, and a summary measure of school age experiences, how many years they were in school. And what is striking is changing a child from being not stunted to, from stunted to not stunted, the direction we want to go, has a big impact and increases by about a half a standard deviation the performance of adults 35 years later in terms of reading comprehension test. Now, increasing a year of schooling also has an impact, but it's an impact about as a fourth as large. So you would have to increase schooling by 4 or 5 years to have the same impact as indicated here of moving a child from being stunted to non-stunted. I now want to go to benefits to cost. With regard to benefits, there are several points that are indicated here. I will not read through them, but just point to a couple examples of them. One example, and here the example I'm using is one of even earlier in life, that is moving a child from low birth weight to normal birth weight range. And the center column gives the estimates in dollars of the benefits of doing so. The point here is these benefits occur over the life cycle. Often when looking at improving low birth weight or other elements of early life experiences, there's focus upon what happens immediately. In this case, reducing mortality, reducing morbidity. Well, those are positive benefits, but they're actually relatively small compared with the benefits of increasing productivity during the adult years, which come about from better birth weight. So you see the numbers are biggest for the benefits which have to do down the road 3 or 4 decades, but important benefits which persist for a number of decades in improving productivity. Separate, well, a part of the issue here that I don't want to spend much time on, but I just want you to be alert to, is it's hard to estimate these impacts. It's hard because there's many unobserved factors that may contaminate matters. This is of relevance because it's very useful to have longitudinal data. It's very useful to have good treatment and control comparisons, perhaps experimental data, or to be able to use certain statistical techniques to get at the true impacts rather than just the associations in the data. I will not give a lecture on econometrics, but just give one illustration here. This gives examples where in the first column are just the associations in the data. In the second column are estimates of the causal effects controlling for all these problems using a particular methodology. The only point here is it makes a big difference. You're looking in the first row, the difference is a factor of 3 or 4 in understanding the importance of early life on later outcomes. Now, to look at benefits relative to cost, you need to not only have benefits, but you have to measure the cost. And sometimes this is underemphasized, although perhaps not by Ministerios de Haciendas, but by society as a whole or by advocates of early childhood development, sometimes not enough emphasis is placed on the cost. And the costs have various components. They are not the same as the governmental expenditures. Part of the cost are from the government. There's also important private costs that need to be incorporated. So to evaluate a program, one needs both the benefits and the cost. Here's a few examples. In 2004 and again in 2008, there was something called the Copenhagen Consensus, which was an effort to evaluate a wide range of policies, ranging from international trade policies to health policies to nutrition policies, etc. And in those evaluations, interventions early in life ranked very highly. There was a similar kind of conference in San Jose focused on Latin America a few years ago. In that case, the first priority was given to investments in early life, in early childhood development. These are based on comparing benefits to costs, and the benefits are much larger than costs, so these ratios are much larger than 1. More recently, Patrice and I and others have been involved in updating and revaluing what we know about early childhood development internationally, and internationally among all developing countries. And we have some new estimates that are summarized on the slide of what would be the gains from bringing across all developing countries enrollments in preschool programs for children 4 or 5, excuse me, up to about 50%. And as you can see, the magnitudes are quite large. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars, and in terms of the benefit to cost ratio, it's very, very high. It's about 18. Those benefits, in this case, come from improving the productivity of these now children when they become adults, and those benefits persist throughout their adult lifetime. So, kind of in summary, this is a diagram from Jim Heckman and collaborators. There's potentially very high gains from benefits from investments early in life.